Something that I wish for humanity, right? One thing I wish that everyone could experience the depth of themselves. More than that, I guess, I wish everyone could safely experience the feeling of connecting with the subtle energy that always surrounds them, right? To connect to this state of complete and total presence. And maybe you've had glimpses of it and it's a beautiful thing, right? You can call it divine, you can call it spiritual, you can call it electromagnetic, you can call it whatever the fuck you want to call it. I don't really care how you define it. I just I just want you to experience it. I want you to, you know this feeling. And so I'm going to try to describe it a little bit and how we might get there, or some of the things that I think get in the way, I think, of this. But, to me, this feeling of total presence feels a lot like an embrace, right? So when I feel alone or overwhelmed or pulled in a million different directions, I come back to this feeling and time slows down. My lungs can breathe fully. I can get a full dose of oxygen that I need, right? And I feel really connected to my body. And there's this sort of lightness, I think, that comes with it. And it's not always light, but it's grounded, I would say. It's not oppressive or suppressive is how it feels. It feels free. It feels free. That's a good way to put it. It feels free. And before I knew how to do this, before I knew how to tap into this feeling on my own, I used art. And I mean, I still do. I still love, because I love, as you may know, if you've watched any other videos or heard me talk about anything ever, really, I love art. And especially I used music and dance to help tap into this feeling, like rhythm, especially, and like harmonies, and being able to sort of move through that and feel into those sounds. That helps a lot for me. And then also sometimes, if I'm being really honest, Disney movies help me sometimes with, maybe not with getting into a state of total presence, but with a sense of catharsis or emotional release that maybe I've been clinging to or suppressing. And that, we won't get into anyway. That's a whole other tangent. But sometimes, in music, dance, Disney movies, childhood movies, nostalgia, whatever, sometimes it was just getting out in nature, right? When I didn't have access to those things, or when even those things felt overstimulating or distracting in some way, getting out in nature was enough. And listening to the way that the wind moved through the trees sounded like ocean waves, especially as someone who lives in the desert. I miss the sound of the ocean, or I thought I did, until one day I realized that when it's windy enough and you're around trees, it sounds like you're by the ocean. And I loved that. And it's comforting to me. Or, going for a swim or dipping my feet in a river or a creek or something, and feeling the gentle way the water moves around my body. These feelings, tapping into sensation, tapping into these, this wonderful planet that we engage with, and all of the things that come with it, can sometimes help with presence. But, this feeling that I want everyone to be able to experience is not because I don't want that because it's the answer. I want people to know this feeling because it's a gateway. When you can experience this feeling, when you allow yourself to surrender to it, when you are able to intentionally engage with it or just allow it, right? Answers emerge, not some sort of absolute truth. I don't really believe much in absolute truth, but the ones that serve your path, your truth, right? Your soul, yours, it serves you in some way. Your answers can emerge. And I know that might sound a bit abstract or out there for some folks. And if that's the case, then it's okay. I might just not be the right messenger for you. But what I'm trying to say with all of this is that I think so many people struggle to engage with this feeling because they have a vice-like grip on their emotions to the point of suffocation. And I think there are many different factors that contribute to that. I think it's understandable because humanity, for one, has not been particularly kind to our senses, right? We overstimulate, we shun, we shame, we do all sorts of things to anybody who experiences emotion, right? We have all sorts of judgments and consequences for feeling. And as a result, I think there are many aspects, people who have engaged with cultures like that, right? These sort of oppressive or repressive cultures. There's this illusion that emerges of control, right? That is clamping down on any and every experience that evokes feeling, right? Strong feelings, especially. And so, what we become conditioned, or what some people become conditioned to do or to believe, is that we need to avoid feeling, right? We need to numb ourselves. We need to escape them. We need to avoid them in some way. We need to conquer them, right? We need to have some sort of, cognitive, logical dominance over emotion. And I don't, I think that all of that stems from a lack of trust in ourselves to experience a feeling, right? And that's where the challenge lies, where you or I or someone doesn't trust ourselves with experiencing a feeling, or what it means to experience a feeling, or what it means to express a feeling, or what it means to be witnessed in that feeling. We don't trust it. We don't trust ourselves to be able to handle it for whatever reason. And so we suppress it, or we numb it, or we avoid it, or all of the things, right? And, there's this other alternative, right? There's this other way of controlling these feelings that isn't about trying to cling or micromanage them. It comes from allowing them to flow, right? Of building enough trust within yourself to allow a feeling to move through you, and trust that you have the capacity, the strength, the resilience, all of the things, the skills, the support to survive it, to move through that feeling. And I think whenever I think about this, I often think of the quote from Dune, which is, "I will face my fear. I will allow it to wash over and pass through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn my inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing, Only I will remain. And so the way that I interpret that phrase, that quote, that mantra is, in order to conquer, right? Quote unquote, conquer. I hate that word, whatever. But in order to experience such a strong visceral emotion like fear without letting it, overcome you in a way that is unhelpful or whatever, is you still have to allow it to move, right? To be released. It's this sort of paradoxical thing where in order to actually manage and navigate emotions, especially ones that we tend to stigmatize or shame or find particularly overwhelming for our nervous system, we have to allow them. That is how we can, quote unquote, control them. You know what I mean? That's how we manage it. Because, and I, from my experience, both with myself as someone who tends to intellectualize my feelings all the time, and as a therapist who's worked with clients who who struggle to navigate some really, really difficult experiences, let alone the emotions that come with them, right? Fighting feelings with your mind tends to be a recipe for suffering. Trying to talk yourself out of feeling something, trying to convince yourself, trying to self-medicate in so many of the different ways that we self-medicate tends to just either exacerbate or delay suffering to the point where it becomes protracted. It becomes something that is almost constant. I mean, suffering might be constant anyway, but it's the intensity doesn't ease when we are trying to just talk ourselves out of feeling something. It's really, and for me, especially like when it comes to therapy, there's all sorts of opinions and experiences out there about this, but it's really, it's learning how to trust yourself, how to trust your discernment, your judgment, your mind, how your mind works, how your own particular flavor of logic works. And it's also learning to trust your body, to trust that connection between your mind and your body. And so the signals that your body is sending to you and learning how to understand them and receive them and consciously engage with them. Again, with that level of discernment to be able to understand what is it that you're experiencing? What is your body trying to tell you? What is it that is creating some sort of contributing to a sensation or emotion or a feeling that you're having, and trusting yourself to have that discernment, to have that ability to allow it and move through it, right? To not get stuck on it, to not, it's that kind of thing where, you're blocking the doorway when you're experiencing a feeling and it's overwhelming, or you're worried about it, or it creates anxiety, or it's something that you're trying to avoid. You end up you're jamming the door, and the reality is the feeling is not trying to get into the room with you. You are not in the room. You are on the threshold, right? You're the gatekeeper of your own self, right? Of your own ego, of your own mind, of your own consciousness. And so it is just trying to cross the threshold, and you're standing in the way. That's one way to think about it when we're thinking about this, allowing, and again, that kind of that mantra from Dune, for me, it evokes that kind of imagery, right? Where it's, okay, I'm going to open this door to this feeling, and I'm going to allow it to pass through this threshold and move on its way. Say, hi, nice to meet you, or hi, be quick about it, and see you later. Like all of that, like just let it pass through instead of trying to have some sort of like ultimate, like showdown with this feeling, and so, it's really learning to trust this and trust yourself to be a stable container, to build the skills and the discernment to do that. Even when you feel flooded, right? I think this is the other thing, like this is the other side of this coin, so to speak. I don't know that it's truly a polarity, but there are the people who suppress, who are like the little Dutch boy sticking their finger in the dam, trying to prevent all of the emotions from flooding through, right? And then there are the people who have let the dam, like, the floodgates are open, Amanda, and I am underwater, and I've been there for quite some time, and I'm not quite sure how much longer I can hold my breath, or how much longer I can keep treading water, or whatever the case might be. And in those floods, when you're in that space where it feels like there's too much feeling, or where you feel like the feelings are on top of you instead of moving through you, right? That's also challenging. And again, it's finding that place within yourself, that trust within yourself, that, you are the gatekeeper, right? If this is a metaphor and you are underwater, give yourself some gills. You know what I mean? like learn how to swim underwater, or breathe underwater. And not in a way of remaining stuck in your suffering, but in a way of, having that through line, having that sense of agency and empowerment to move through what you need to move through to get yourself to shore, so to speak, to get yourself out of the water and to a place where you can then, manage the flood, to get to a place of support, to an environment, to the people who can help you and support you through that. And again, that's also about trust. And part of what this comes down to for me as well is, when it comes to, it's not just about, it starts with self-trust, because I think part of the things that block us, or that contribute to the distrust we have in others, or to that sense of loneliness and isolation that we experience, that is very real. And there are very real reasons why, there might be very unsafe people around you. You might not be in a safe environment. And so it's important to recognize that. And again, that's where that discernment comes in. But it's trusting yourself to have that discernment, to be able to know and say, this person is safe, this person is not safe. And knowing when to take that risk of being vulnerable and asking for help, or opening up to somebody, or allowing somebody to support you. And it might not come from the people or the places that you expect them to, but there's always somebody or something there to reach out to you. And I think it's important to remember that. And I think so much of the reasons why we forget that can be true. We forget part of who we are. We forget why we're here, right? What we want to live for. We get lost in it, or we get so caught adrift, right? Or so turned around and topsy-turvy in this experience of either feeling too much or being afraid to feel too much because we're doing something to ourselves, right? We are abandoning ourselves. We are enacting our worst fears upon ourselves, right? So if I fear abandonment and I find myself in a situation where, and maybe that's rooted in something, right? Like maybe there was a real experience of abandonment that I had, as a child or at some point in my life that evoked that entrenched that fear, that sort of created this loop where I am stuck in this fear. So there's a very valid reason for it. But then I start abandoning myself because somewhere in there, I created this story that, oh, someone abandoned me and that really fucking hurt and that was really scary. And so I must be somebody that people abandon. And so I am going to treat myself. So then I internalize that in some way. And so I abandon myself, or I betray myself. I sabotage myself. I do the things to myself that maybe somebody once upon a time did, or maybe I had an experience with, but I'm not always in that space anymore. And it can be really painful. Like this was a hard truth. This was a hard pill for me to swallow when I realized just how much I was contributing to my own suffering and my own struggle because I was creating a self-fulfilling prophecy within myself, right? And this is not to, I want to be really careful here because I don't want this to sound like, a level of hyper independence where, nobody else needs to be held accountable. Absolutely, the people who hurt you should be held fucking accountable. You know what I mean? Like the experiences that contributed to this story that you've internalized, or the situations that led to that, that's not okay. It doesn't make it okay. And, and so it's not this or that, right? It's not so black and white. It's not so cut and dry. We all have a sense of responsibility for our own actions and the way that we respond to things and the stories that we believe about ourselves. And I feel like that's a very simple thing, but it's not always easy to navigate or to understand. And so it's just a truth, right? It's just a reality. And the other benefit to this, or the other piece of this, is even when we are part of taking responsibility for those stories that we feed into that might not be helping us, that might be contributing to our pain and suffering, and might be inhibiting our ability to experience this sense of presence, right? To be fully connected to ourselves and to the environment and the world around us, are these, is these pieces. And connection is another antidote to that. So there's the connection that we have with ourselves. There's that trust that we are building within ourselves, and the trust and the connection that we are building with the people around us. That is really important. And, and it's not it's not linear, right? So maybe you're having better luck building trust and connection with people around you. Maybe you have a really supportive community, but you're really struggling with that self-trust. And so that's what needs your attention. So great, you have a support network, you have a community, you have your people. Lean on that. Don't shun that. Don't shy away from that. Don't dismiss that or minimize it. And maybe start noticing or paying attention to where you need to trust yourself more, right? Where you are telling yourself stories that are contributing to your worst fears, right? Where are you abandoning yourself? Where are you betraying yourself? Where are you sabotaging yourself? Where are you judging yourself or just being really mean and cruel to yourself, right? How are you being a bully to yourself? And then for others, maybe you trust yourself, or maybe you are in this place of, hyper independence where you have had to be self-reliant. And maybe there are some stories, maybe that's where the self-fulfilling prophecy is in that distrust of others. And it's learning how to trust your own discernment when it comes to other people, when it comes to connection, right? How can you trust yourself to build friendships and connection and relationships that are reliable and healthy and supportive? That there's something to that there so that you can have your people. You don't have to fight so hard all by yourself. And I think, there's so many nuances to this, and there's so many different things that I would love to just dive into with it, because it's deep. This is deep stuff. And so, again, allowing yourself to experience emotion, building the trust within yourself to do so, and learning how to recognize or start, if that's something that feels really foreign to you, just starting to observe those spaces where it's hard, or where there's a story, there's something that you might be telling yourself that isn't really true, or there might be a way that you are contributing to a story of suffering, a story of pain. And I will be I'll be real honest with you, at least in my experience, I had to move through the pain. You know what I mean? So it was, this is how I've been contributing to my own pain. Let me take responsibility for this and address it. And it's kind of like that metaphor of, ripping off a Band-Aid, but it's not a Band-Aid, right? It's more like there's a whole bunch of stitches that I'm having to undo and re-stitch, like a whole bunch of wounds or scars that I'm having to, redress. And so it's not that the wounds necessarily go away right away. It's not that as soon as I accept this responsibility, everything stops hurting or stops being hard. It's that now I have more agency or control. Now I am the one who's deciding how I am stitching this up. I am deciding what medicine we're using, right? I am the one who gets to choose what my recovery plan looks like. I have agency in that, and in the places and the for the particular pains or experiences where, maybe it's still a little too scary to navigate by myself, or maybe the pain is too much for me to just grin and bear it and, and seal that, and take care of it myself. It's learning how to find the people who will, at a minimum, hold my hand while I do it, right? Or who will hold me down while someone else that whole, I'm sorry, this is a very visceral kind of a little graphic, but I have been rewatching Game of Thrones, so I'm going to blame it on that, but in my subconscious. But anyway, the point is, there are people who can help us through this, who can walk with us through the scarier parts or the harder parts, and be a witness to our strength and to our resiliency. And if you feel if that is something that you crave and you feel alone, or that doesn't feel accessible to you, I have also been there, and I have shed many a tear and cried to my gods and, done all of the things, because of just how lonely it can get sometimes. And then I've been surprised. And then I've been surprised by people who show up in my life. And maybe it's not, exactly how I imagined it, but there's almost always someone who shows up who offers something, some sort of comfort, some sort of reassurance, some sort of aid or resource or gift or companionship. And, and so again, it comes into that, like, allowing it and being able to be present enough to recognize when those things are showing up for you, even if it's not in the way that you exactly imagine it. And it doesn't mean that, like, the way that you exactly imagine it will never happen. It just means that it's not going to happen in this particular moment, but you do have something, right? You're not completely alone. You are not there are lights, there are lanterns in the dark, right? There are lights in the darkness. There are lighthouses guiding you to shore. If you can get to a place where you can allow the panic to pass through, you can allow the fear to move through, you can allow whatever pain or agony or anguish or whatever it is that you're struggling with to just pass through and get to that place of sort of surrender and start paying attention to your surroundings. And then that's when you'll start to notice it, right? And again, it's not going to be immediate. It's not always going to, to me, it's something that is very simple, but it's not easy, right? It's, just surrender to it. Just allow it. It's a really simple thing for me to say. It's not always easy to do, but you can do it. You can trust yourself. You are capable of so many incredible things. And when you are able to allow your emotions to move through you, when you are able to get to this place of presence and surrender and the sort of irony, I guess, of feeling so empowered once that happens, oh, how amazing the mysteries of you become, of your depths, of your soul, of who you are. It's amazing. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. All of it. Light, dark, gray, all of the whole spectrum of light and dark and shadow. It's all beautiful and it's all you. And you can do that. So anyway, thank you for listening. I hope this made sense. I hope it wasn't too hard to follow. And I will see you when I see you.